council meeting for, what's today? For the November 19th, 6 p.m. Could I ask people to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will lead the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Here.
Councilmember Henley?
Here.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Present.
Mayor Agramonte?
Present.
Thank you.
I wanted to let everyone know that there has not been a closed session, and I'm asking if anyone has any changes to the agenda. None. We'll go out to the public and ask if they have anything they'd like to change about our agenda. No, I don't see anybody rise to the, although we have late people that run up at the end. Okay, I'll close that. Would anybody like to make a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
So, at this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for the council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone and by stating and spelling your name. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, ma'am. Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in the town of Sonoma. 41 years ago, on the day before Thanksgiving, I found myself at the community center. I had been dreaming about the building, and this woman came up behind me and whacked me on the back and said, "Young man," I was a young man then, "you could either space out or unload my car." And I unloaded her car and went to work and stayed there for quite a long time. And I'll be there on Thursday to enjoy Gary's beautiful Thanksgiving celebration at the Veterans Building. And don't forget, tomorrow, the Friday Farmers Market will be at Depot Park at 9 o'clock. Hope to see you there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, thank you.
My name is Shelley Masters, and I live at 336 Banchero Street. I attended the 5.5-hour Planning Commission meeting on November 8th, and bless their hearts, it was quite a long evening. I have a diagnosis for electromagnetic sensitivity. It's called EMS, which is a disabling characteristic that has been recognized by the Federal Access Board since 2002. Under the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm part of a protected disabled class and have specific rights under protections that the U.S. Congress directs the ADA to guarantee. I'm now unable to live and work anywhere near wireless transmitters, such as the 3 5G cell towers that are planned. I saw a wonderful presentation of fiber optic networks, and it's a 159-page paper. I just made copies of the first 18 pages, the introduction, and I would like to give them to you. And I'd like you to consider using fiber optic networks that are already installed in our streets. These high-speed optical fiber-based internet access networks are available to all communities. They're safe, reliable, fair, affordable, energy efficient. Longmont, Colorado, and Chattanooga, Tennessee already have them, and they make the cities money. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Ms. Masters. Is there anyone else who would like to step up and speak? Seeing no, oops.
Mark Marthaler, 146, excuse me, from East Spain Street. I didn't have anything prepared to say, but there was something that I would just brief message regarding what's happening in Napa with the 5G installations. They have approved 3 test pilot installations. So they haven't put in place any kind of mechanism to update their ordinance and sort of hold back on these things, which means that the doors have been opened, right? And already, Extenet has submitted 5 applications, and one by Mobility, if I'm pronouncing that right, has submitted 1 application. Just my interpretation is that since they have done nothing, all these companies are submitting applications, and that's one thing that we hoped to avoid, and I'm grateful that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. This evening, I've asked if anyone has any meeting dedications.
I do.
All right.
Oh, I want to dedicate this meeting to Kevin O'Neill. He passed away this week, and when I first moved here, the O'Neill family was so nice, and it's just so sad that Kevin passed away. And I think a lot of people knew him, and he's leaving behind his daughter, his twins, a junior and a sophomore in high school, and that's it.
Thank you. And I would like to dedicate this meeting to the people of Paradise. I think it's something that needs to be recognized, and there before the grace of God go I. Our town was protected by firefighters and saved our town. Fires were all around us, and I just hope that there will be some peace that comes to them. But as I said, I'd like to dedicate this to the town, to the city of Paradise. And because I'm offering that, I would like to give a special thank you to Gary Edwards. You've said you've gone up there a couple of times. Is that what you said, for delivery of food? Probably getting the lay of the land, what everybody needs. And I really would like to say I appreciate that as the mayor of the city of Sonoma, and also for the people of Sonoma and for our council. I really thank you. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. I know you don't like that stuff.
I don't
You
like.
just
but,
do the job.
I like doing that stuff, but I really have to shout out to Rotary. I looked at the numbers tonight on Paradise Strong, and it's right around $90,000 that were raised. We got together at the Red Grape on a week ago Friday, and one of the guys who knows about computers set up Paradise Strong, and it's moving along and getting some national attention, and hopefully it'll raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's going, like our Rotary Club, directly to. There's nobody in between. It's 110% of that money will get used for victims. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. So at this time, I'm going to be turning to the consent agenda, consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are listed to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Could I hear if anyone would like to change anything with the agenda? Rachel.
I would like to pull 4.5.
Pardon?
I would like to pull 4.5 to vote separately.
All right.
We don't have to
thank
talk
you.
about it.
Okay, so no one else? I'll take it out to the public if you have anything you would like to discuss or share that you would like pulled or changed. I don't see anyone, so we'll come back to the city council. Is there a motion for the others?
I make a motion to approve items 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4 of the consent calendar.
May I have a roll call?
Second.
Oh, Senko, thanks. 7:30. Could I have a roll call?
Councilmember Edwards,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 4.5.
And this one I don't need to have discussion on it. I just wanted to vote for it separately for the sake of consistency.
I don't get what that means, but okay.
It means my
So-
vote's going to be different.
All right.
So just for the members of the public, 4.5 is the second reading and adoption of an ordinance prohibiting all commercial cannabis activities except medicinal deliveries and finding that this action is exempt from CEQA. And this is the second reading, was before council for their initial review and first reading.
So this is the end of the wild ride, I think. Is that right? Are there any comments from the? Oh, we've already done that. So could I have a motion?
Yeah, move to
You
approve.
would need to still, I'm sorry, Mayor, you would still need to do a public comment on this
Oh,
since
all
it was
right. I
pulled
thought we
separately.
did that, all right. Okay. I'll move for a public comment from our constituents.
Thank you. I don't believe the wild ride is over. I think the ride's just begun.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Do I have any emotion from, any comments or?
No, comment, I agree with you on that one, Ken. I move to approve item 4.5.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Henley,
No.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
No.
Mayor Agramonte.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion
you.
carries 3-2.
Thank you. So now I'll send this over to the city clerk. Thank you.
Moving into the regular calendar, item 6.1, discussion, direction, and possible action on the participation in Sonoma County Transit's Fare Free program on Route 32 and approve resolution authorizing the city manager to execute agreement for January 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020.
Good evening, Mayor Agramonte, members of the council. I'm going to give you just a brief overview, and then I'm pleased to have with us tonight Brian Albee, who's the Executive Director of Sonoma County Transit. So this is an opportunity in front of our community to basically participate in Sonoma County Transit new Fare Free program, and for Route 32, which basically serves the Sonoma Valley. And basically, this is a program that they have test piloted in a couple of agencies, Sebastopol, Windsor, and Hillsburg, and has been very popular and positive there in terms of increasing ridership. The way this has worked was basically the fare is free because the local agency is paying it. So you would get on the bus and there would be no charge because we are underwriting the cost. So it basically becomes a partnership between the local agency and Sonoma County Transit. So for us, we would be sharing this cost with the county because a majority of the ridership and the actually route is outside of the city limits. And that's a little unique for some of the routes that Sonoma County Transit has with this program. So basically, if council is interested in this for 18-19, it would start in January and be a half year, be a little over $5,600 to underwrite the fares for the first year, and then half year, and then 19-20. It's estimated to be about $13,500. So fairly modest contribution by us, a larger contribution by Sonoma County. But again, overall for the 2 years, it's about $63,000 that the city and the county would be sharing in order to provide this program. I'd asked Mr. Albee to come to the podium, and he's got a few charts to be able to kind of show you the route and answer some questions of how they are branding and providing and really trying to bring transit more local.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Brian Albee with Sonoma County Transit. I'm very happy to be here and talk about our new Fare Free program. As was mentioned, this came about first in the city of Sebastopol following a kind of public workshop process we had very early in the year to generate ideas on how to generate more ridership, interest in their local transit service, and more interest from the local governments in local transit. And the city of Sebastopol passed through their budget, participation in the program in May. It was effective in July, and then shortly after, so did Healdsburg, followed by Windsor in August. And we have our charts. I can refer you to the board report. You can see there we listed by the 3 cities what ridership has done for the first 4 months, July through October. In Sebastopol, we saw a 52% increase in ridership. Windsor, just for the 2 months, September and October, we saw 87%. Healdsburg was 32% for July through October, and collectively the 3 routes increased 53%. As you know, transit over the past few years, I was here a little over a year ago and talked about what we provide here in the Valley in terms of ridership and transit all throughout the state and really the country. Ridership has gone down over the past several years. And so we are always looking for new ways to generate some excitement and some interest in transit, and this is one thing that has really generated some traction. It's a positive program. It's fun for us to market. We give credit on the buses to the local governments that have sponsored the program, and like I say, it's been very positive. And where we've done it in the 3 cities, it's been well received both by the local governments and our ridership, and especially for a lot of the new folks that are now riding our service. Concurrently, we're working with the city of Cloverdale. We expect to have after the first of the year, probably in February. Now we have our charts. I think we can go through some of this very quick. Just some of our marketing that we've done with the 3 cities. The chart, I've made reference to it in the write-up. It's a little difficult to read from here. The program cost, Kathy mentioned that this is a shared contribution with the city and the county, is that this is the only local service that Sonoma County Transit provides that serves both an incorporated and an unincorporated area. So the contribution we've asked from the city is on par with what the other 3 participants have paid, kind of on a per capita basis. So it's all consistent with that. The city's share is requested as 30%, and the county share is 70%. Of course, the remainder. We've projected in the request for this year's funding a 25% ridership increase. If ridership doesn't increase that amount, then the city's contribution would be less. If it does exceed the 25%, then that will be capped at what we're showing you here tonight. Same thing with what we're projecting for or requesting for fiscal year 19 and 20. These are just some of the what we've done. This is the Windsor bus over here in Sonoma. You have 2 buses very similar to this that will design a special graphic package for the Sonoma service, and we'll get graphics on the bus listing the city and the county in this case as co-sponsors in the program. This is what the Healdsburg bus graphics looks like, and this is where we started in Sebastopol, and this is a photo of our new electric bus that we'll introduce in Sebastopol next month. And sometime in the future, we'll probably have electric buses over here as well. We'll be needing to work with the city kind of early on as we venture into electric vehicles in terms of finding a charging location for them. Since they're limited in range at this point, we would have to charge the buses while they were here during the day. And we would do that in inductive charging, kind of like your cell phone now. As the bus lays over the plaza, it would just automatically charge. So we'll have more discussions about that as we get closer to getting some more electric vehicles in the fleet. But our next steps at this point with regard to this program, if approved tonight by your council, we would go to the Board of Supervisors on December 11th, seeking their approval. And then the program would be effective on January 1st. Through June of 2021.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
You answered most of my questions already, but as far as the cities where you've seen appreciable increases in ridership, have you had to do anything else, or is it just the fact that it's free is so enticing that people have started using it?
In Sebastopol, prior to July, their service days stopped fairly early. So we did extend it. I think it was used to stop at 2:30 or 3 o'clock. Now it goes to 5:30 or 6. But that was the only service increase we made on the three cities. Healdsburg, it didn't change, and neither did Windsor.
And then as far as the routes and the schedule, is when, do you know how long we've had this particular route? And are there any, like, what's the process of reviewing it to decide if it's optimized? And also the schedule, I know there's been discussions about, maybe having something that high schoolers could take in the morning, which would go a little earlier, but I'm thinking like in the summers and Tuesday nights of people going to the farmer's market, which would be in the evening. So how does all that work?
Well, in terms of the history of the route, this used to be run by Fish here in the community. It used to be a Sonoma Caravan. And they ran it in the 80s till about 1988, and then, or 90, or somewhere in that, between 88 and 90, and then Sonoma County Transit took over the service. When Caravan ran it, it was one bus. When we started operating it, because of the service area, it's two buses Monday through Friday, one on Saturdays. And we are making a change with some new schedules coming out in December to get up near the high school earlier. So we'll be able to serve the high school better in the morning than we do today. In terms of your summer events, we can certainly talk more about that. In the town of Windsor, on Thursday nights when they have their events, we send a bus up for a parking lot shuttle from the town green to the high school where they have lots of parking. We're also talking next summer to do something similar with Healdsburg. So if there's interest over here, certainly we should have that discussion and start planning now for next summer.
So does anyone else have a question? No, I would like to just ask a couple of tell you about what's going on here in Sonoma. I really like the model of Sebastopol because they actually researched and had forums. This is something I'm really interested in, and I know that I've already contacted the schools to be involved in this, and the hotels, which is wonderful, said that they would survey their employees about schedules and bus stops, which I think is really great. That's another thing that we were talking about. And the Vintage House has actually volunteered to use their venue to be able to have forums there. So that's something we're looking forward to.
Okay.
And I'm trying to mirror Sebastopol because I think they did it the really great way to ensure that this isn't just going to be a test. Because if we don't really ask people where they take a bus or what time they need a bus, because I know that the Sebastopol bus, I think, was adjusted to the Rialto Theater. Is that right? I think they
does
were
serve
let
the
off
theater.
across the street
Yes.
and disabled people couldn't get to the show because the intersection is so large. So I just assume we're going to be taking a look at all of the same things because I would love it to be successful. How much does an electrical vehicle cost?
The picture there, that one, that's about $550,000 to $600,000.
Okay. Because we may have a private sunder. So someone who's interested in doing this for Sonoma. But do we have any questions? None? I'm going to take it out to the public. Thank you very much. I'm so excited about this. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this? Seeing no one rise, I will take it back to the city council. And, okay.
So council comments and/or motion to approve the resolution.
Motion, says resolution, but it's a letter of agreement, so to approve the letter of agreement and approve our participation in the program.
Yes, I'm sorry. There is a resolution. The letter of agreement is attached there. So
it's
if you,
attachment. Oh, I see it.
if you authorize if you approve the resolution, that authorizes me to execute the letter of agreement. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council to participate in Sonoma County Transit's Fare Free program on Route 32 approve budget adjustment of $5,625 for the fiscal year 2018-19, and approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute agreement from January 1st, 2019 through June 3rd, 2020.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
David?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment. This has been something that has come up a lot. So I just want to thank the county, and I know Mayor Agramonte, that's been talked about this. Almost every candidate that's ran for city council, including Jack Wagner, 4 years ago, he was bringing it up. So I'm very excited. I hope that we can really advertise this so we get the ridership. I would really like to see what Mayor Agramonte was saying. I would like to see some forums as this goes on to let people know, what does make sense, because I see that from what I'm seeing, it's a good diagram, but there might be little tweaks that could be done. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you.
And I'll support this as well. With the marketing, we might want to put the love sign on the bus, so you call it the love bus, and everybody can just jump into it. Just a thought.
So I have a motion and a second. Yeah.
Oh, same thing. I know Mayor Agramonte's been working pretty hard to get the word out about this, so thank you for that, because we need people to know about it for it to work. So that's great. Good partnership. And I just thought, in light of our agenda tonight, it's kind of exciting that our partnerships with the county appear to be on a really good track right now. We have this and our next matter about the homelessness, and it's a really good progress for us as a city. So thank you.
Thank you. May I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion
Thank
carries
you
unanimously.
so much, Mr. Albee. Thank you. I think we need a clap on this one. And I wanted to mention, I don't think I'm going to get the number right, but Kathy King from the Haven said that they gave out, about 40 or 44 vouchers? 144. So could you imagine? Now there will be free rides, so that means something. Thank you. God, we're almost done. Holy cow, are we finished?
No.
Oh, right, 6 point, all right. Okay, we still have to keep moving. Okay, 6.2, I'm sorry, City Clerk?
Discussion on Homeless
That's
Emergency
exciting.
Aid Program, HEAP, Block Grant Program, and direction and possible action on adoption of a resolution declaring a shelter crisis pursuant to SB 850, Chapter 48, Statutes of 2018 and Government Code 8698.2.
Mayor Gramonte, members of the council, good evening. As Vice Mayor Harrington said, we're on to another county partnership here. So this is about Homeless Emergency Aid Program Block. This is a block grant program from the state of California, and in the 18-19 budget, there is $500 million that is set aside for homeless services, and 12.1 of that will be coming to Sonoma County. And as we look at these funding, the valley and the city will be eligible for some of these funds, but in order for some of our eligibility to occur, we need to approve a resolution which basically declares a shelter crisis. And so we have prepared that resolution for your consideration. It's been reviewed by the state to make sure it matches their precise language. And tonight we have with us Michael Goss with Sonoma County CDC. And poor Michael is fighting a hard cold, but came out anyway to make sure he could present. And so I'm going to have Michael go through and give you an overview of this program, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And apologies in advance. I'm a little bit stuffy, so I'm gonna muddle through, and I'll try to go through this quickly. So thanks for Kathy for inviting me, and thanks for having me out here. I've also been involved with the task force that's been meeting on Fridays here, the local homeless task force, which has been going very, very well. So I'm just going to breeze through some of this presentation and realize I have it right here in front of me. Just to give you a little bit overview of the timeline we're on and the reason we're seeking the resolution. We've actually started redesigning the way our continuum of care and our homeless system is governed here in the county. So you may have heard recently we have a new leadership council that has stood up to oversee not only this funding, but the majority of other homeless services funding in the county and the cities of Santa Rosa and Petaluma. That leadership council actually has 2 members from the Board of Supervisors, 2 members from the City of Santa Rosa City Council, and then a member of the City of Petaluma City Council. And it also includes Don Schwartz, who's the Assistant City Manager of Rohnert Park, who is representing all of the smaller cities on the leadership council. So all the cities have representation as well. And below that, there's a technical advisory committee that has more stakeholders, about 25 members, who are advising the smaller leadership council. So that leadership council has oversight on the way these funds are going to be distributed and disseminated coming shortly. So we've had our first technical advisory committee meeting, and we have our first leadership council meeting on December 10th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that's when the recommendations on the HEAP funding, not the actual projects, but just the overall buckets of funding, the types of services will be made by that body, and we'll send our application to the state. And it's actually the easiest application I've ever seen. It's literally 2 pages, and they give you $12 million in 60 days, if only things were that easy in other ways. Let me just go into a few details on HEAP as well. So it's called the State Homeless Emergency Aid Program. And again, this is a statewide program. So every county, every continuum of care in the state is getting funding. And for our county, that's $12.1 million. It actually works out to about $11.6 million because we have some admin that we'll be taking for us to use. And as Kathy mentioned, every jurisdiction that does this has to declare a shelter crisis, quite simply saying that we don't have enough capacity and emergency resources. Really simple, the county has declared a shelter crisis, and most of the other cities have. My supervisor, Jenny Abramson, is actually in Healdsburg right now in front of their city council, and I'm here. Rohnert Park, Cloverdale, Sebastopol, Santa Rosa, Petaluma have all submitted declarations. What's eligible is a broad range of emergency supports to individuals, families, and transition-age youth, and transition-age youth meaning 18 to 24 years old. Services such as outreach, prevention, navigation services, operating support, rental assistance, and even permanent supportive housing for capital improvements as well. It's a really broad range of funding. The state's giving us extremely flexible guidelines. When we had state representatives down for a meeting recently, pretty much everything people suggested, they were like, sure, okay, great, sounds good. They really are intending to give counties discretion in using this. We also have to have a local collaborative process for this funding. Where you see COC, that's Continuum of Care. That's our local policy for homelessness. We've had numerous public meetings. We've had a couple in our office. We've had meetings with other cities. We've had meetings with homeless youth, meetings with formerly homeless adults themselves. So that is all taken care of. We submit that documentation to the state. We have been reaching out to all cities as well to get their input if they have specific requests or needs in their jurisdictions. The shelter crisis declaration that's before you tonight, every jurisdiction, not just the county, but every city actually has to submit one too if they want to use their funding from HEAP for capital improvements. So anything capital, whether that's shelter, enhancement of shelter, building new housing, which is difficult, I'll get to that in a minute, or shoring up permanent supportive housing has to have this declaration. I think I covered that in bullet number 3. This has Sonoma City, County of Sonoma, Petaluma, Santa Rosa, Sebastopol have all declared. This has been updated since then. I've mentioned a couple other ones. The general use for HEAP funds are intended to provide immediate emergency assistance to people experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk. So people have to be either literally on the streets or in shelter or at 14 days or less away from becoming homeless. They're intentionally broad to allow local communities to be creative. Applicants will include in their proposals how we're going to use the activity to provide immediate emergency assistance. And the uses must align with Housing First policy. So California is a Housing First state now, it's state law. So any project that's created has to follow that. It's part of the regulations. Again, I talked about some of the categories of expense, and this is what we'll actually have to submit in our application. So there would be one bucket for services such as street outreach, criminal justice diversion, homeless prevention, another one for rental assistance, which we think will have probably quite a bit of funding in that category because it's very flexible. Those are housing vouchers, subsidies. And then capital improvements. A lot of shelters have identified needs such as, enhancing infrastructure to meet Housing First demands. A lot of shelters are older and they need, Sam Jones Hall in Santa Rosa needs a new roof, for example. And then other jurisdictions don't even have a shelter. So is there a possibility to, have some sort of shelter open in those places? One thing to note is that for the homeless youth, there is a regulatory language that 5% of the total funding we get has to go towards transition age youth, or ages 18 to 24. We have a very active group of formerly homeless youth who advise us. I met with over 20 of them earlier, I think it was like a month and a half ago, and they raised a very good point that we're 17% of the homeless population. We should probably get about 17% of the funding. So that's one thing the youth have recommended, a little bit of a higher proportion. We have one of the highest incidences of homeless transition age youth in the country in our county. We've actually seen an increase in the valley in the past too, from youth. The timeline, just the last couple things here. This is a very fast timeline. The HEAP funds have to be spent in 2.5 years. So half of what we award has to be spent by January 1st, 2020, and 100% has to be expended by June 30th, 2021, which makes it really difficult to build housing. That's going to be tough, even though that's our biggest need is new permanent supportive housing. So we are going to have to look at other creative solutions unless jurisdictions or nonprofits can identify a house they could quickly buy and turn over. That's one option. But from the ground up, housing would be very difficult on this one. So projects must be ready to be implemented quickly. The next steps. So HEAP, you see the second acronym there, CASH, which stands for California Emergency Solutions and Housing. That's an additional $800,000 that's coming to the county that will be going out in a procurement process early next year as well. We don't need a resolution for that, so I didn't include anything else about that. We submit our application in December. We get the funds probably around February 2019. We're going to run a local process concurrently, so on January 2nd, we'll have a competitive RFP that goes out to a request for proposals. It goes out to providers and agencies. Probably will be due around early February with decisions in late February, early March. And we have been reaching out to cities because there is a possibility of direct allocations for cities. Rather than having a city go through a competitive process, if cities can identify a couple projects that they would need, they could potentially apply directly to us for that allocation. That's not me, that's Eddie Vedder, but he's better looking, so I left him on there. So I'd be happy to...
Say that's you before the cold?
Right, that's me. That's me before I got sick. I got a haircut on the way over. He plays a better ukulele. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Does the council have any questions? I do, if no one does. No, we're good. My question is the HEAP award. Could I ask if there was a thought of enlarging or remodeling? You were talking about capital improvements. Does that have to be shovel ready in preparing the grant proposal, or that just once that is approved, then you can get in and say, here's what we'd like to look at?
Yeah, I think it depends. So the application process, encouraging people to be very creative in what they submit. We are constrained by that June 2021 that everything has to be spent. So I think ideally capital improvements would be done for something existing or that was easily rehabbed. One thing that's eligible under these expenses is something called navigation centers. San Francisco has done these. These are very low barrier, 24/7 facilities that are not necessarily built, but something could be converted where people can come in with absolutely almost no barriers, bring their pets, bring their shopping carts, whatever they have, and then have immediate housing assistance there. That model's worked really well in the city. It's something that I know other jurisdictions are considering and doing.
Thank you. Gary?
Yeah.
So these dollars that'll come in, so our city limits is very small. So are we going to be looking at the entire valley? Is that are we able to spend that money outside the city limits as well?
Yeah. Well, it would be outside the city limits would actually fall kind of under us. So if there was a project, right, that was identified, we could look at something there.
So would it be something that where you have the extra money that would be for the county and we have money in the city?
Yeah.
Where the land values are much lower outside the city limits, where we could get more bang for our buck?
Yeah.
That's something that these monies could be put together?
Yeah. That's certainly
Thank you.
possible.
Are there any other questions? What, Amy? Oh. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thanks,
Goss.
Mayor.
You'll be here for other questions. I think I'm going to open this up to the public.
Okay. Sure. I'll
Pardon?
hang out.
Oh, Amy, excuse me, Vice Mayor remembered her question.
I'm sorry, I forgot
No
my
worries.
question previously. So with regard to spending the money, does it count as spending the money if you disperse the money to the city and we apply for it, or is it spent when we spend it?
Spent when you spend it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it has to be spent by whoever has it.
The
by-
recipient must spend
recipient.
it by that time. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll disperse it pretty darn quickly once we get it in the
Because
application.
we know how to spend it.
Good. That's what we want to hear.
Thank you, and you'll stay for if we need follow-up for answers. Thank you, Mr. Gause. I'm opening this up to the public.
A lot of germs up here, Michael.
Don't touch anything.
Good evening. My name is Kathy King, and I live in Moon Valley Mobile Park. I'm the executive director of Sonoma Overnight Support. That is owned by the city and run by the nonprofit for the past 11 years called SOS. First of all, I want to thank the city council for your previous extra money that you allocated to the Haven for a past year to operate, and I want you all to know how appreciative I am of that. I want to encourage the city council to adopt the resolution of declaring homelessness a crisis here in Sonoma. The current residents of our shelter half of them are first-time homeless, and the other half, which is heartbreaking, are over 60. Our day clients that come to us for showers, meals, case management, and laundry facilities were up by 15%, and this is before our winter shelter is going to start. We're averaging 30 people a day. The food program, which is increased over 10% this past year, we're looking to serve about 35,000 meals by the end of December. I just recently, tonight, placed a family at our winter shelter ahead of time, a mom and 2 boys that are going to school here. We got permission from the CDC to open, no money, but we got permission to open up ahead of time, and we're doing that because we're now seeing people that are coming and wanting to know, when does the winter shelter start? That starts December 1st at Sonoma Alliance Church. So we did check with the other shelters, and there's no family services. They're full, we're full. I'd like to encourage you to approve this, but also to keep in mind that this crisis, some of it is unseen. We have a number of people that we serve, but also there are hidden people are hiding in homes under the bridges, and they're not counted. So our numbers are higher than what you can see in the homeless count. But it is very important that we continue to reach people that are at risk and in need of not just our services, but other services that we can bring into Sonoma that SOS doesn't have the capacity to do. So I thank you for that, for considering this. But we are in a crisis because our numbers are going up, and we haven't hit the rains or the colds yet. So thank you. I'll take any questions if you'd like.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak from the public? Seeing no one rise, I will bring it back to the city council. What is the pleasure of the council?
I will definitely be supporting this tonight. And there's been a lot of things happening in the last few months with the issue of homelessness services in Sonoma Valley. And it's exciting to see because 4 years ago we weren't really talking about it at all. And then it all went from a pilot program for safe parking, which ended up deciding not to continue, but it's been growing. And even outside of this particular bond that the state has decided it's going to seriously put money towards, and the number I've seen is that the Sonoma Valley collective area could potentially get $500,000 to work on these things, which is almost $500,000 more than we've been getting. But on the side, we've also, our homelessness subcommittee that I sit on with Mayor Agramonte, we've been also meeting thanks to a separate source of funds that Susan Gorin procured for us and the Valley of $250,000. So there's actually a lot of things happening that have not happened in this region before, and it's nice to see the county stepping up and acknowledging that there are service gaps and more support that's needed. And I have to say thank you to Sonoma Overnight Support in the Haven, who've steadily been here for, what, a decade? 11 years. For 11 years, sort of, working as hard as they can, but the needs keep getting bigger and bigger. So things are starting to, swirl in the right direction, and I'm excited to start talking to people about what kind of capital projects we can work on, what's going to bring the best benefit, and then also the pieces that have been missing, like having better access to mental health care and substance abuse counseling. That all has to go together to make this type of program work. But things are steadily moving in the right direction, and I think the Sonoma community has been supporting this for a while, but it's nice to know that we're getting some big money to put behind it. So I look forward to continuing forward, and we have a few task force meetings left on our other project, and it's very encouraging to hear what is possible. So I will definitely be supporting this tonight.
So having being up in Chico this past Thursday with thousands of homeless people around the Walmart that everybody saw in the news and so on, it's pretty amazing. But it's in all the work that this council has done over the last few years, and the conversations we've had with Kathy on homelessness, etc., and the work that investigating over in Santa Rosa that I did. It was interesting to see the people that were displaced from their homes, but also the chronic homeless that were all of a sudden everybody's blended together up in the Chico and the Paradise area. So it's very interesting. So I'll be supporting this tonight, and I'm glad to see that some of the money is actually showing up. I'll believe it when the check's in the bank, but but I think it's a good start. And then with the affordable housing things that we've approved. The Altamira project, etc. I don't know how if any of this money could shake that project loose, but it would be great to get some of that construction going and get some shovels in the ground. Thank you.
So I also will be supporting this tonight, and I think in a way that the crisis we experienced with our own shelter losing funding this year turned out to be helpful, because it sort of shined a spotlight on what was happening here, and it wound up ultimately causing us to be more collaborative. I think that's my perception of it, and so I'm hoping that kind of turned out to be a positive, that we said, like, we can't go on this way, we have to have a better plan, and that is happening. And the funding, a lot of times we have problems that we don't have, that the answer to is actually that we need money to do it, and we don't have any money, and so it feels very intractable. How can we resolve them if we don't have funds, and it requires substantial funds? And so probably even $750,000 is not enough, but what we have been making do with is been basically nothing. So it is a tremendous relief to think of all the people that will be helped by this. And I remember when we were here, I wasn't on the council yet, but we were talking about the parking program, and somebody was talking about people sleeping in blackberry bushes and under bridges and all those things. And, that's just something we can't accept as a society. So I hope that great ideas come forth, and Mayor Agramani and Councilmember Hundley have been working hard on this, and it's a lot thanks to their help as well, and Kathy King, that we have secured this additional funding. So I think it's really, it's great. It's great real progress, not just talking about it, but doing it. So it's exciting.
Good.
Yeah, I've always said that homelessness doesn't have jurisdiction, so I think it's great that there is it's a group effort. I remember when there was counts, and I'd be talking to Susan Gorn and other individuals, and count them all. It's just not Sonoma or Sonoma County or the state of California. There's these different criterias, I know, but when it comes down to it, it's our problem. So I'm glad that we're stepping forward, and I will be supporting this tonight.
Just have one last thing to say. I can't believe we're going at warp speed, actually, compared to everything. But, you know, there are parts of Sonoma County that are very active. And so we need to be able to bring more people to the boards, to the Board of Supervisors, to show that we really believe this is a serious issue. So that effort will be coming soon. And we'll be seeing that if we can get more people to go to these meetings, just be able to discuss this. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and it's not up to us, I think it's above our level, but you know, conservatorship is very important for homeless people who cannot take care of themselves, can't make those decisions. And I think that somewhere in the future, how that gets resolved, I'll yield to Vice Mayor here, maybe in the upcoming year. That might be something we can discuss. It's above our level, I believe, of government, but it's so important.
I honestly wanted to bring up conservatorship, so then I thought, like, well, no one will know what I'm talking about. Yes, of course. For so many of these problems, the county has an affirmative obligation through the Department of Adult Services to conserve these people, and they don't have the ability to provide for their own shelter or manage their own financial affairs, and there is a legal obligation to care for them, and it's very hard to get the county to do it. Thank you.
That's exactly what I said. Thank you, Amy.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I've had that very frustrating case. Yeah.
So I'm going to take this out to the public for any comments. Seeing no one rise, I will bring it back to the council. I know I have the beginning of a motion.
And one thing I don't know if I had explained before, but the task force that we're a part of, it's a collective group from different people involved with efforts all over the valley, and our philosophy is that the city and the valley are one region for this, and that's the way that it has to be. And so any solution is going to have to collectively consider the whole group together. So that's why it's exciting. And I would like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma, California, declaring a shelter crisis pursuant to Senate Bill 850.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte? Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, sir. I hope you feel better. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. City Clerk, please.
Moving to item 6.3, discussion, consideration, and possible action on a request by the Blue Wing Adobe Trust for $1 million from the City of Sonoma to support acquisition and preservation of the Castignaso Mission Bell Farm located at 196 East Main Street with the purchase of a conservation easement.
Thank you. I'm turning this over to the city manager.
Great. Good evening, Mayor Agramonte, members of the council. So as was just recorded, we're here to talk about a request from the Blue Wing Adobe Trust. Got just some slides to walk through with you. I need the clicker. So as I think most folks are well aware of this property, the Castignaso Farm is located a block off the plaza. And it definitely contributes to the character of our downtown. There's a single-family residence, 2 barns and some outbuildings, and the bulk of the property is undeveloped. In addition, it's next to the plaza and is part of our historic downtown. So the Blue Wing Adobe Trust basically approached and is in escrow with the Castignaso family. And the Blue Wing Adobe Trust is a local nonprofit devoted to historic preservation. They are currently in escrow and have an agreement with $7 million, which is due in mid-January. And there's a $2 million non-refundable deposit due the end of November. And so the request before the council is a request for $1 million to assist in the preservation of the property. And the city's, this would be used to purchase a conservation easement. So just a little background, as council is well aware, there are a variety of kind of historic elements and overlays on this property. So the residents in the two barns are all identified in the National Register of Historic Places and are contributing buildings in the Sonoma Plaza National Landmark District. And this is one of 3 properties that are listed in the 2005 Open Space Preservation Strategic Plan. The zoning currently is a medium density residential, which allows 7 to 11 residential dwelling units per acre. And the lower parcels are within the city's historic overlay district. And I think it's important to state that overlay districts are created where the council has a desire to regulate new and existing land uses by providing guidance for development in addition to standards and regulations for the primary zoning and sub areas. So these overlay districts apply to areas where there are important site, environmental, cultural, and other capabilities. And that's part of the historic overlay, which this property is in, the lower part is in. There's also a couple of the parcels are also again in the local inventory, which council adopted basically in '06. This is a map of the historic overlay zone, which shows is the blue dotted line. And I'll drill in on this next one. And then this shows a couple of things. The pink is the downtown planning district, the plan area. And then there is a kind of a yellow and a pink, which are at points coterminous and at points segment a little bit. But at the property where the Casa Ignacio farm is, they basically are, this is showing that the property is in the Sonoma Plaza National Historic Landmark and also in the Sonoma Plaza National Register Historic District. One of the questions and information the council wanted in terms of making this decision on this request was to understand the current funding status. And again, I know Patricia Cullinan is here and members of her team if she has any updates as I finish my presentation, if you'd like to hear directly from her. But this shows as of the middle of October and the middle of November, overall, there are donations and then there are pledges. So looking as of currently November, as of November 13th, there was a little over 300,000 in funds and donations on hand and 2.4 million in pledges. So a total of 2.7 basically funds that are either soon to be or immediately available. I do, and I think they will communicate this, that because of the nature of this process, they've been asking people to pledge and not necessarily donate the money, because if this transaction is not able to be executed, returning that money is cumbersome. So, but they can elaborate more on that. There is an operational plan and budget which was also attached to your staff report, and the basic revenue from the plan, once it would be acquired by the Blue Wing Adobe Trust, would be transition the home into a vacation rental, which is allowed as an adaptive use and would need to come back through a city process. There's looking at renting the house and the barn out as a wedding, kind of 3 times a year or so is what's looked at, and then leasing the property from some horse boarding. And then there are costs associated that they've outlined as well. So part of the thing as a city, we cannot just give money away without having a public purpose. And the city attorney can elaborate on that if you need. But part of the way that a public purpose can be seen and created is obviously through a way that there is something beyond that is created here. And so the way we would do this is the city would not just be donating funds to the acquisition, we would be purchasing a conservation easement if there's interest. And that would be a legal agreement between us and the Blue Wing Adobe Trust once they own the property. It would be binding into perpetuity. And again, we would be negotiating what are the terms of that conservation easement. So those are not all laid out here tonight because we don't know if council has interest or not, but we would need to return to you with those terms. But clearly a conservation easement is used for ag preservation, open space preservation, those types of things, but each of them is tailored. The conversations the staff has had with the members of the Blue Wing Adobe Trust is that we would be looking at putting the conservation easement on what I'll call the developed parcel currently, the parcel that has the barn and the home and the house. The rest of the 3 parcels that are pasture, someone else might be able to, they could sell those a conservation easement to someone else, but we would only be acquiring the conservation easement just on the developed piece of property. It frankly is a fundraising opportunity for them, and it makes sense for the city to be involved in the conservation easement on the developed property should you want to go that way, because they are going to have to come back to the city for a series of processing permits, et cetera. And if there's anything that needs to be kind of tweaked or something in that conservation easement as things go on, you would have that ability. So in order to consider this $1 million request, council also asked for an overview of the general fund to understand the city's current funding parameters. So I'll ask Sue Casey, our assistant city manager, to come forward and go through this part of the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Angrobendi and council members. Oh, I have to do this. Okay.
You're there.
I'm there. Okay. So tonight I'm presenting a brief update on the fiscal year 2018-19 general fund budget and reserves. And this update summarizes the city's financial position for the first quarter of the current fiscal year, and that would be July through September, and is focused on the major general fund revenues, general fund expenditures, and reserves. So as of the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 18-19, the city has received only 17% of projected revenue, but that's completely normal. Most of the city's key revenues are collected only periodically, twice a year for our property tax. That comes in January and May, and then we have quarterly true-up payments for our sales taxes. And these normal lags make it really difficult to present a full budget picture for the first quarter. A more accurate picture will be available with the mid-year update, and that will be in late January or early February. So sales tax, including the voter-approved half-cent Measure U sales tax, property tax, and transient occupancy tax, or TOT, are the city of Sonoma's primary revenue sources. And collectively, they provide 72% of total general fund revenues and are major indicators of the city's financial position. Then there's other minor revenues that are collected periodically or seasonally, like some fees and the business license taxes, which are collected in January through March. The adopted budget for fiscal year 2018-19, I'm not sure when to move. Are we still on the revenues? Yeah. So the adopted budget for fiscal year 18-19 projected a general fund operating surplus, which is ongoing revenues minus ongoing expenditures of $158,000. However, the available revenue data, which really is only TOT, indicates that revenue is trending somewhat below projections, and that's just the TOT revenue. Therefore, budgeted revenue expenditures, when close to budget, the full amount of the projected surplus may not be realized. TOT makes up 21% of total general fund revenue and is an important indicator of the strength of our tourism-based economy. And July through September typically are some of the peak months for TOT. And the first quarter of this fiscal year, TOT revenues totaled $1,225,000, and they're running slightly lower than the level of the previous 2 years. We're down about 4% from 2017 and 1% less than in 2016. The occupancy rates for 2018 are also running slightly below 2017 for July through September. And although the exact reasons are not known, it's thought that the fires north of us may have impacted visitors and hotel traffic over the summer months, thinking that we were also on fire. So the fiscal year 18-19 budget, excuse me, included projected TOT revenue of $3,950,000. But if we assume that revenue for each of the remaining months of the fiscal years like prior years, this would result in TOT revenue of about $3.8 million, or about $150,000 under budgeted estimates. So there are some significant revenue changes for the fiscal year 18-19 budget, resulting from 2 ballot measures that passed in the November election. Measure S, the 2% increase in the TOT tax that passed with 79% support, will be effective January 1, 2019. And based on the first quarter TOT data and the seasonality of this revenue, we're projecting about $340,000 in additional TOT revenue for the general fund this fiscal year, and then about $750,000 annually. Then there's also the passage of Measure M, which was the countywide 1/8 cent sales tax for parks, and that'll be effective April 1st, 2019. And we're projecting this revenue source will bring in approximately $29,500 in new revenue for city parks this fiscal year. And then over the next 10 years, it will bring in about $118,000 annually for the city parks and open space. And these revenues are not yet reflected in the adopted budget or in tonight's update. So next we're going to turn to expenditures. And first quarter year-to-date operating expenditures for the general fund are shown by department and by category in the charts in your staff report. As of September 30th, 2018, the general fund budget is about 22.3% expended, and this is fairly typical for city expenditures at this time of year. Certain costs that are usually paid at one time, for example, the city election costs, annual memberships and subscriptions, and some types of annual contracts are not yet reflected in this budget update. As the year continues, increased legal costs are expected due to several complicated initiatives: the cannabis policy, cannabis voter initiative, cell tower applications, cell tower urgency ordinance, in addition to lawsuits, appeals of development projects, and some other issues. And again, more expenditure detail will be provided at the mid-year update. And then last, we're going to turn to the city's general fund reserves. And reserves are really important to a city's financial health, resilience, and opportunities. And general fund reserves are built over time and need to be considered one-time money. Reserves are a result of higher revenues or lower expenses than budgeted, which then translate into year-end operating budget surpluses in the general fund. Occasionally, a city will also have possible windfalls, such as bequests or donations, but these often come with strings attached as to their purpose. And it should be noted that the city is currently reviewing its general fund reserve policy. The city's current general fund reserve categories include the emergency reserve, the operating reserve, and the special projects reserve. The fiscal year 18-19 emergency reserve, which is calculated using 17% of fiscal year 18-19 discretionary general fund revenue, is $3.2 million, and it can be used only for operating or repair funds for local disasters or catastrophic events. And then there's the fiscal year 18-19 operating reserve, which is set at a flat $1.5 million, and it's used as a bridge to adjust for financial hardships and economic downturns. And then finally, the special projects reserve is the funding source for one-time projects. And that would include, but they're not limited to, capital improvement projects, surveys, studies, and analysis of both operating and capital needs, updates of adopted plans, or temporary service programs. And there is a large need for funding of capital improvement projects since the loss of redevelopment funding, which provided the city with about $5 million a year. For fiscal year 18-19, $579,000 from the special projects work reserve is reserved for capital projects. And then in the following fiscal year 19-20 and 21, that we show the potential use of $1.1 million from the special projects reserve for capital improvement. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the council have any questions? David?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Sonoma Splash and where that money is right now, based on what you just showed.
It's in its own fund, so it's not in the general fund.
Could we talk a little bit about that fund?
Yeah, happy to. So as the council is aware, there is an agreement between what is called Sonoma Splash, but is officially, I think, the Sonoma Valley Health and Recreation Association. And this is an agreement for the funding of recreational facilities that the council had entered into in October of 2014 for the purposes of basically providing Sonoma Splash once a swimming pool is built and kind of operationally started 30 days after, then the city begins a string of payments for 10 years, $25,000 a year. So at the time the prior council made that agreement, this agreement here, they took $250,000 and they set it in a special fund. I am assuming it came from the general fund and it was set aside in a special fund. It could just as be easily, frankly, at this point, be in your general fund and assigned, similar to what you've done with some of the rest of your revenues in the general fund reserve. So as I've looked through the agreement, there's nothing in the agreement that speaks to the $250,000 being in a special fund, but that was the action of the prior council.
Thank you.
I do have if there's financial questions, that would be great. I do have a few other items to finish the presentation, so.
So one of the questions I know I asked the last time we talked about this is any excess land that the city has. And I think we talked about one spot that was on MacArthur and 5th Street West and a few others. Have we identified any other properties that we have that are potential surplus?
So we had GIS map the city's property. The only property that I could see, and it would take some unraveling to figure out, is at the corner of 5th Street West and MacArthur. There is a small parcel next to the two new homes that were built there that is currently zone park. So at some point it must have been donated to the city, maybe as part of development. It is zone park. We would have to figure out how that was given to the city to see how and if we could sell it or use it for some other purpose.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want me to ask now or not, but with regard to the purchase of a conservation easement, are we obligated to obtain our own independent appraisal, or can we rely on someone else's appraisal?
I would look for the city attorney on that one. I don't know that.
I would kind of imagine we'd need our own, but.
The answer is you don't need an appraisal, but in terms of trying to avoid a gift of public funds, it's often advisable to get one. Meaning if we're going to get a conservation easement for a certain parcel size, configuration, and development status, is it worth $500,000 to remove that from development potential? And I don't know the answer to the question.
And a follow-up question on the conservation easement. So the city wouldn't be able to take advantage of a tax relief, but if somebody donated money to this cause, is there a possibility that a donor could get a conservation tax break? I mean, is that why we're not, if we're going to put money towards this, why we're not taking the other parcels? Why we wouldn't make a conservation easement for the entire?
Well, I think the interest, and we can let Blue Wing Adobe Trust answer this question too, but my understanding is they want a conservation easement kind of on all the parcels. As we were talking it though, and especially with my recommendation being not to fund a full $1 million because of the city's financial status, I don't believe that we have enough in reserves to make that kind of contribution. And so based on a lower contribution, then my recommendation was to maybe look at just one parcel. Those other parcels, they could still add value, and as a way of helping the Blue Wing, do the additional fundraising. Part of what the conservation easement does too is it reduces the property tax, because it basically says it's no longer going to be able to be used for residential, and the council could end up rezoning the parcel at some point, which then reduces the property tax for the nonprofit as well. So I think there's financial reasons for the Blue Wing, and there's financial fundraising opportunities for themselves and or maybe another funder.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the city council? None? Did you want to?
I do have just 2 other slides, but if you have
Oh,
questions, Mayor.
Sure, no, fine.
Okay. So just, I think some of this we've wrapped up, but going back to a little bit of the funding and why the staff's recommendation is not the full amount that's requested is, our financial position is very different than what we had in 2007. We don't have redevelopment, we basically had over $5 million a year. $1 million of that was going towards housing, and a little over $4 million was going really it was the city's capital investment engine, and we don't have that anymore. And we have significant needs in terms of both augmenting some core services, but capital investments, as the assistant city manager spoke. Clearly, this is important property to look at preserving, and so and a commitment from the city is important as they try to go out and get money from other places. So the recommendation from staff is that the contribution for the city not exceed $500,000. If the council feels like they want to do less, that is fine, obviously, as well. But from a financial perspective, we didn't feel like we could recommend to do any more. And again, the way this would work is in January, assuming Blue Wing would have enough money and council decides to move forward, there would be a purchase and sale agreement, and there would be a conservation easement. Those would be part of escrow when they close the middle of January. We would need to come back to the end of December with a draft purchase agreement and draft conservation easement for you to review, and then give direction to myself and the city attorney's office to finish that. So there are a few other places that if the council has interest, we could also provide some support. The funding we just talked about. The council could also waive for a period of 5 years the planning processing fees. I would not recommend waiving building permit fees, but for someone, if they needed to come in and pay a fee to do the vacation rental, or pay a fee for a use permit to do a caretaker's home, those types of things, you could waive those processing fees for a time period. And then we would need authorization to go do those purchase sale agreements and the conservation easement. The other place that might be helpful would be to spell out what the city's commitment and what direction you give us if you do give authority to move forward, wrapped up in a letter from the mayor that they could then use as they're going to talk to other agencies. So those are the recommendations from staff, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions at this point? None. I'll take it out to the public. Here she comes, the public.
Okay, so staying well aware. So first I'd like to introduce myself, Patricia Cullinan. I know all of you guys in Ned Forest. And we're really excited about being here. We really thank you all for considering this. First, what I'd like to do is name who our partners in this are at this point. Over 9,000 petition signatures, signers, 108 donors, all the tribal groups that have been associated with this property that we've contacted while doing the initial archaeological survey that responded to George McHale, that he should keep them informed of everything that happens with our project. California State Parks, who's an adjacent neighbor, the Sonoma League for Historic Preservation, the Sonoma Petaluma State Parks Cooperating Association, aka SPARKS, the California Mission Foundation, the artists that have photographed the horses have been inspired to create a story from their interaction with them. Assemblyman Mark Levine, the Sonoma residents who walk by the property every day and rejoice in seeing open space and animals, all the kids who've grown up in Sonoma passing the horses on the way to school, Susan Gorin, and the council here, you've been very supportive with the resolution for the ag and open space, and also the thousands of visitors who make a stop at the property as part of their visit to our plaza businesses and landmarks. So I think I'd rather, with all that, answer questions that you may have. We think this is very important to Sonoma for a lot of reasons. The opportunity to preserve this property is important to our history. The mission is key to the town of Sonoma. We're the end of the El Camino Real. We're the last mission, and we're you know, there are remnants of the mission on that property that no one sees, but they're right underground. I think Peter Meyerhoff probably will get up and talk about that later. So do you have questions for us before I just rattle on for a long time?
Well, at this point, I'd like direction from our city manager, how we might move forward with this.
Well, I think, this is a little different than kind of a typical public comment. So I think if counts similar to an appellant or an applicant, in some ways you could consider Blue Wing Adobe Trust as an applicant. So if you'd like to, it's really the prerogative of the mayor if you'd like to entertain questions right now and have a bit of a dialogue.
I'm comfortable with that. Do we have any questions from the council?
I have two questions right now. One,
Thank you.
What are the plans for the pasture areas that would not be under the proposed open space easement? Do you have ideas as to who you would approach next about those, or just sort of that part of it?
The initial process is that we have to come up with $7 million to buy it. And whether those people who donate to us ask, just like the city, that the money goes specifically towards conservation. Our goal is to have the entire property under a conservation easement, and eventually have it as a park, designated as a park, and it's in perpetuity. So this will be something that Sonoma will have forever.
And conservation easement, that's correct.
Okay.
And then as far as, so I think the total, if this went forward, math, it would be up to, what, 4 million pledged and donated so far if the city decided to do, say, $500,000 tonight. I'm just, I don't know if my math is correct, but I think you said you had
3.33 or something. It's 2.7 plus 5, 3.3.
Maybe plus 1 million.
Oh, 1 million, yes. 3.7.
Plus whatever comes out of the meeting tonight. Got it. And then what's your strategy for trying to get the rest of it before the deadline to purchase?
Well, I read the list of supporters because we have a long list of people who are either helping us get funding or that are interested in funding the property. It's been a very condensed process, as you can imagine. This is we're 4 months into trying to raise $7 million. So we made a lot of contacts. It's just a matter. It's a negotiation. Like, we're negotiating here for $1 million, and we're negotiating with people for millions of dollars. So it's a slow process, and we have a lot of possibilities that we're talking to.
And I know that,
sense?
Yeah, well, I know that when you've talked to the county and the state, they asked you what about the city? Who in the state and what department in the county do you think might be viable sources of funds to help with this project?
Well, I think after we purchase the property, the Ag and Open Space does have grants that we can use or we can apply for restoration where necessary of the property. There's potential, I think, more from the state that we get funding, especially since Prop 68 passed. And to do that, we'll have to have a bridge loan between any money that we have and any money that we potentially could have, but that's going to have to be a pretty secure could get. So
Sonoma Land Trust.
Yeah, Sonoma Land Trust.
Land Trust.
Yeah, for what?
For money.
Oh yes, we are talking about money, aren't we?
There have been many organizations who have said, "Well, what's the city doing?" And they kind of wanted some ante from the city before they went to put in funds as well. And they're one of them.
Additional questions?
Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of how you would manage like a vacation rental and a horse farm? Who's going to do that? I mean, we have the Mason Abbey House. There's some challenges about having a volunteer organization run, rentals. So who would do that? And if it's one individual, how would you ensure that that was able to be carried on?
Okay, well,
Let me.
sure.
So I've done rental management. I have rentals that I manage, and I've done that for 30 years. So this is just one house, and then
well, I mean, for one thing, there are vacation management rental services, and that's actually in our operating expenses, putting in 10% of the income. The other fact is that it might actually be less expensive to just rent it as a house than to have it be a vacation rental, because to make it a vacation rental, we would have to upgrade it quite a bit. It's a really nice house. It's not probably up to resort standards. So it may very well be that we won't even have that expense. We do intend to have 2 full-time people operating the entire facility, and then our board would actually manage the property, and I am actually going to be the lead person on managing the property.
Do you have an understanding of the property being self-sufficient? I mean,
Yes, we've penciled out the revenue and the operating expenses. Like right now, we're sort of maybe $12,000 a year short. And I mean, I probably could have rounded that up, but I just left it alone. We would have opportunities for additional fundraising every year. But this is all financial, right? This isn't like physical how to manage it. You just mean the money, right?
I just mean like if you're taking over a horse farm and that's not your and a vacation rental and that's not what you do for a living, how might one go about learning how to do that?
Okay.
And do you have a plan to do that?
Okay, my family had horse farms. I have had horses for 20 years, and I have horses now. So I mean, I'm knowledgeable and passionate and a little mad, a little crazy. I mean, that's just what horse people are. You just ask anyone.
And then you would make a plan to train a successor to take over these duties?
Yes. The kind of lead person would also be a horse trainer. The lead salaried manager is actually a horse training professional. There are lots of very talented horse trainers who actually don't have a place, to do what they do. We're not talking about giving little girls lessons in arenas. We're talking about gentling horses, starting out horses. And so what people need to do this work is a facility. So part of the plan is that we would have boarding for 6 to 8 horses, and then we'd have 2 empty stalls, as it were, and those the equestrian manager would actually do training from that as an enhancement to his or her income.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Edwards would like to ask some questions.
So this might be a question for city manager. So it's a $7 million buy, and the improvements for the home, the barns, the retrofit of the barns, because I knew Milton pretty well. They're a little crumbly, some of the barns, etc. What is the plan, and how much money are you considering in talking about time? The way projects get built here, how much before you get any revenue? It's going to be a year, 2 years. What are you anticipating as the reconditioning time? And then if it's, we talked about it being a park, so that would trigger ADA, accessibility issues, etc. Where does that, how much money is that going to cost?
Okay, we have a range in our construction estimates of somewhere between $800,000 and $1.5 million, and that is not like a range for the same thing. At the low end, it would be a basic kind of sustained rehab of it, and at the higher end, we're fixing up buildings and building new facilities and things like that. The rest of your question was the ADA. Well, the word park is. I'll back up. We only need to supply equal access for the parts that we're actually giving access to the public on. So, for instance, we're talking about turning the dairy barn into that would be the meeting hall and the administrative parts of this. So that's right adjacent to the paved area right there. We would also put restrooms in that area, so you could actually give access to the people without having access for the entire thing. It's not a pasture that you would walk in. You would only use a few of the facilities.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the pasture. I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the buildings,
Right.
etc.
Right. So that's how we see that.
So kind of on the line of questioning about succession planning, and so all of you have useful skills and you sort of see how this project works, but I'm thinking like, I don't know, 30 years down the road, and the title's going to be in the Blue Wing Adobe Trust. Is that the thought that it would
That's
state?
correct.
And as far as the sort of mission of having the horse component, but also the Blue Wing, which doesn't seem, I don't know, maybe you have other horse projects I don't know about, but it's kind of a different thing. But as far as sort of a long-term vision of some cohesive relationship, even when all of us aren't here anymore and other people are still making this thing work.
My quote was pushing up daisies. I think that we do have a younger member on our board, and that that is a consideration. And we are talking about succession is a hugely important issue, especially when you have property. So we are working towards that, and a successful it will be a successful nonprofit operation. So.
This opportunity will become more and more rare. In other words, there'll be fewer and fewer places where you could board a horse and where you could train a horse. So I don't think it's overly optimistic to say that there will always be people who actually would like to do that. I have no proof, but it seems that it would be scarce and therefore it would be desirable.
Thank you. So at this point, no one has any other additional questions? So at this point, we can take it out to the public?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this issue?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Sheila O'Neill. I'm here tonight in my role as president of the North of Mission Neighborhood Association. We strongly support the city donating anything that you feel capable of donating to this effort. What we need the city to be right now is not the savior, but the catalyst. We need you to put that money forward so that other people get the confidence that this can happen in a very timely manner. We need the Casagnoso family to believe that we can do this. We need other funders to believe that we can do this. And that's where the city needs to provide the leadership. So what we're looking for you is not for the overall solution, but to be our leaders. And we know that this is a project that everybody is behind. This is one that we all agree should happen. It's just a matter of how much money the city's comfortable donating towards it. So it's nice to have a project where everybody in Sonoma seems to love it and embrace it. And it goes back to the historic preservation, which is another issue that I'm very concerned with. But it also goes to our future and how we show our children and our visitors and our locals the importance of Sonoma's agricultural history. So what I'd like to do is say that if you can give $500,000, if you can give $1 million, if you can just give your support financially as well as spiritually to this effort, it will allow the Casagnosos and the other those that donate to feel some confidence. So please donate as much as you feel comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Peter Meyerhoff, 684 West Napa Street. And I'd just like to say a few words about the cultural significance of this property. At one point, the Mission Church was located just 10 to 15 yards to the west. And almost certainly there was a cemetery that came onto this property, a mission, the Mission Cemetery, the main Mission Cemetery. There were 900 burials at the mission, so I'm sure that many of them would be on this property, possibly precluding any development, really. Farther to the east, there was a stone-lined reservoir of the mission. And just beyond that, there are still remnants of an old mission structure that appears to be what they call the lavanderia. It's where the Native Americans would wash their clothes. It's a very unique structure that I've seen there. So it has a very historical significance. And then later, when Vallejo came to Sonoma to secularize the mission, he granted this land to Clara Berryessa, who's probably the very first woman to ever obtain a city lot in Sonoma. And she obtained that in 1842. So there's a lot of history here that ought to be better known and preserved in perpetuity, in my opinion, in addition to the amazing views that are there today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Meyerhoff.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Blattner, and I live at 426 2nd Street East, just around the corner from the Mission Bell Farm. And my husband Simon and I were brought in with the Blue Wing Adobe Trust to help them with their capital campaign. So while Patricia and Ned and Sheila really spoke, I think, eloquently about the emotive part of the place and the spiritual aspects of it and the historicity, when you actually go out and speak to donors and get the hard knocks about the actual money, their very first question for every single one of them is, what is the city doing? So I just want to reinforce that. I think that Sheila is absolutely right. It's a PR opportunity now. We really can't go forward without you, because people are searching. First of all, most everyone thinks you own it already. I think left over from my history from 2007, we always encounter people saying, well, the city already has it, so why aren't you building, and what are you doing? So it's a confusing situation, and we want you there as leaders in the community, and I almost think we can't go forward without you. So I hope you'll come in at $1.5 million. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public comment section and bring it back to the City Council.
I support this project. During our budget this year, I suggested changing some things around and putting $500,000 into this. I wish that we did have $1 million. I agree with the city manager that we do not, but I think we can certainly pledge $500,000 to this project at this time. It sounds like forward going from what you said, there will be additional needs if the property is secured, and perhaps at that time we might make additional contributions. I don't know, but that's probably a possibility in terms of funding. I think this is a critical asset for the people of this town, and we spend a lot of time thinking about crisis situations and like all these different fires that are being put out, but this is really a long-term planning issue and the kind of a question about what kind of town we are. And I think we're the kind of town that really invests in our residents, and this is kind of like a quality of life thing for all of us to have this beautiful thing to share with each other and with our kids and with our visitors and all those things. And I think it's just too valuable to let it pass us by, and we're not going to have this opportunity again, and it's never going to, there's zero other, identical properties in our town or even in the valley. And so this is a unique opportunity, and I think we all need to pull together, even if it's somewhat difficult, to do whatever can be done to preserve it. So thank you to all the people who have volunteered to figure out a plan on the fly and make it work and talk to people about donating money and organizations. And I strongly support it, but I think at this time we only have $500,000. That's my thought.
Anyone else? Gary?
So, I knew Milton, and back in the day, we both were pallbearers for Big Vela. I'm sorry, Tom. And I look at what the state has done over the years and hasn't always cared for Vallejo's property. It's always been an issue where the state doesn't really take as good a care of the properties as it could have over the last several years. They've done a better job. But I'm concerned about putting $500,000 in immediately. I would be open to 250, and then have a promise of another 250 when the funding is pulled together. My biggest concern is $7 million for this property, and then my estimate would be probably more, $2.5 to $4 million to bring it up to what they're talking about. I'm not. I hadn't heard about the horse training facility, which it sounds like, and I think people, when they come up there, that's not what they love to see the Clydesdales, and I know the Clydesdales are going to go away. The other thing I'm concerned about is the patch, which is part of the family. The family years ago had to sell properties around. They had other properties that they had to sell to pay taxes, inheritance tax, et cetera, et cetera. And it's too bad our council at the time, when we had the opportunity last time with the land trust to get this done, that they didn't pull the trigger, which they had the money, but they just didn't do it for whatever reason. So I would support 250 and then something in the future to pull it together. And I think Councilmember Cook brought up the swimming pool money, which, if we have that dough sitting there, that would be great to, maybe that's an additional incentive, and see what happens with the school or wherever the pool is going to end up eventually. But I think that, we have a big issue with affordable housing here. I have I don't know how it's going to look in Jason's paper, that we're putting money to this, but oh, by the way, we're not going to do anything for affordable housing. So I think we have to have a balance. I agree that I want to see it open for my kids, and I've worked with Vela Cheese forever, and go past that every day. And it was great when Milton used to sit out in the barn and wave to everybody. And so that's just part of how I see Sonoma. We've got the Mission Square project being built right across the street. I'm a little bit concerned about weddings, and it's not such a great revenue source. I know people think it is. We've been talking about the Masonavi House with doing weddings and that sort of thing, but then the neighbors have come out and said, no, we don't want that. I think you may have another additional outcry from some neighbors that don't want big wedding parties there 4 times a year, and I don't know that that's a great idea for revenue producing. But I'm open. I'd like to see it stay. And I'm just concerned about, I have a little tiny property in downtown Sonoma, and, it cost me $14,000 for ADA, and it doesn't even get used. So it's, I'm concerned that we're going to run into some bumps, and Peter Meyerhoff brought up the issue that we may have burial grounds there, et cetera. If somebody had purchased this and come in to develop it, they'd probably hit a roadblock. So, I think there's a lot more work to be done, but I would be open to the 500,000, but 250 now and 250 later when it all gets pulled together, like almost escrow, something like that. And so that's where I stand.
Well, I lived on Mission Terrace for 4 years. Don't have to recuse myself because I was a renter and don't live there anymore. But I was one of those that used to walk by, and my daughter stepdaughter, would always want to see the horses. And I always remember looking at that property thinking the proximity to the square and how important it is. The reason I brought up Sonoma Splash, because I think I was the only council member that was here when we got involved in that. And there was only 3 of us because 2 had to recuse because they were on the board. That's how important the swimming pool in Sonoma was 5 or 6 years ago. I think this is an important project, and I do understand what what the public has said. It does show trust. If the city is not doing anything, then that shows distrust, as far as when people are going out there and getting capital campaigns. I do realize there's a lot of capital campaigns going on with Sebastiani, with the theater and the hospital. But I moved to Sonoma 25 years ago for one reason. I could have been in Petaluma, Healdsburg, or anywhere around here, but I came here for the history. I'm very, I think the history aspect of it. I'm hoping that this will move forward and be very successful. I love the fact that the city can, become a partner. I would agree with Vice Mayor Harrington at this point with the 500,000. It's a little bit of a scary number for the city because we do have other issues, but knowing that the Sonoma Splash Money is there, and depending on what happens with that, and with the fact that we can look down the road and see if there's other ways that the city of Sonoma can be, partners in this. Hopefully, if this gets support tonight, coming back to the city and trying to figure out how we can do certain things. I really believe that it's time for the city of Sonoma to look at their inventory. Councilmember Edwards was talking about the little park-like, I call it a ditch by the high school. I mean, it's not very big, but it probably is time that we start looking at there's things that we can take off our plate so we can move into a direction where we can support a property like this. So I will be supporting the 500,000 tonight.
Thank you. As long as, have you? Okay, I'm not gonna step in front of you. You might comment.
Thank you very much. This has been an issue that I have struggled with since it first came up. It seems like, having come to the end of my first 4 years on the council, and there's things on the list that were there on the very first day that are still sitting on the list. And, it seems like a lot of times it's just whatever sort of swoops in and captivates the council's attention is what we end up working on. But fortunately, I've had a lot of time to talk to a lot of people about this particular effort because I did not grow up in Sonoma, and I don't know what it felt like always having that be a part of growing up here and being something that you form a spiritual connection with. But looking at the list of our city council's big ticket items from the last 2 years that we identified, in the last 2 years since our new city manager came in, we've been on this journey through our finances to get them a little more modern and have better projections and know that we'll be on solid footing so that when we hear how much money we have now and how much is coming down the road, we can feel more confident about it. But the other three big projects are housing opportunities, traffic and parking, and the general plan. And these things, housing is starting to get moving on, but the other two have not, although we've already set aside money for the general plan, so don't have to worry about that. But as I've been reviewing what the council is working on now, and it seems like even in the last couple months, things are really finally starting to get rolling. Previously, we talked about what's happening with homelessness services. I also sit on the housing subcommittee, also with Mayor Agramonte, and we are actually getting rolling on things, and it's easier to see what that path is going to look like, and also, potentially having new sources of revenue for those projects thanks to the voter-approved increase in the TOT. So the way that things are moving, I feel more confident in them. And on the flip side, this particular project, I remember I was sitting in the audience during the splash request, and which is that project. I still have faith in that project. It was just a big task to take on from the beginning. But the one thing that I'm really thankful with that one was it was Steve Barbose had come up with the structure for being able to support the program, but also protecting the city's and the taxpayers' dollars, and I'm glad they did that way. And I feel the same way about the arrangement that we have today, because the recommendation of $500,000, which I find it a little bit painful, but I'm going to support it today. You know, it's something that we will pay at the end when all of the money comes together at escrow, purchase is made, and we will be a part of that. And even more than that, we're actually getting something that I find really significant because of all of the different reasons that people love this project. Personally, I find most compelling the historic aspect of it. And like many things in Sonoma, there's just so many significant things here. And this is one where if, you know, the city has now had 2 chances to protect it, and I am quite confident there will not be a 3rd chance if we happen to let this one go. So we're going to get something, and we're going to be able to, the city, on behalf of the people, are going to be able to preserve this, you know, fascinating history forever. And the last thing I'll mention is that this has also been the year of the city and the county becoming better partners and friends together. And maybe this could be a good catalyst to get the state to pay more attention to us because we have such incredible assets in Sonoma, and I think it is the most historically significant city in the country. We'll also be having a bicentennial coming up in a few years, and this is a great opportunity for them to remember that we exist and perhaps throw some support our way. So I am proud to be supporting the $500,000. I wish that we were flush enough to do the full $1 million, but I think balancing everything, that a $500,000 under the terms that have been recommended by our city staff is the prudent way to go.
Thank you. I think I'll comment now. I do support the $500,000. And as a person whose profession was that of a fundraiser, I understand if the people closest to the issue, which is the city, is not supportive, it's a problem for funding. And so I agree with that. Just that makes sense. I'm also on the Sonoma Splash Board, and I spoke to the city manager about this today. And there is a commitment of $250,000. And I've been on it, I think 5 years. And maybe this has been a part of the city for even 15 to build a swimming pool. And we've gone through an awful lot holding on to that land. Different things. And what's so important, I think we can actually evolve with this 250. You know, with Sonoma Splash, the contract says it's $25,000 a year. And that's for swimming lessons, for grants, for swimming lessons or scholarships, for adults that would like to learn how to swim, and also children. And the goal of Sonoma Splash, as far as I remember, has always been to teach children to swim by the 4th grade. We don't want their first experience to be drowning. And that's something that's very important to us. And so as I said, I support this, but I would like to assure the city council that however this works out, that, there could transition into more support into recreation, and that could be the Sonoma Splash at $25,000 a year. But it would be that commitment. It wouldn't be any different. It would be just worded differently for the 250. So I really appreciate the council moving in this direction. So at this point, I'm looking for a motion. Oh, question.
Oh, to the city manager, did you need a motion, or did you just want each of us to comment just because the action is direction?
I think what I'd like to do is have a motion from you to, if I could read it and someone could make it easy that way. I think what I'd like is a motion to support a $500,000 contribution to the Blue Wing Adobe Trust for the purposes of a conservation easement as part of the final escrow. And that council did comment about some of the other pieces that were in the recommendations, which was waiving the planning processing fees, if there's support on that. And then we would be negotiating the purchase agreement and conservation easement coming back in December with a resolution for you to authorize the funding. And then potentially this letter of support from the mayor, or it could be from all 5 council members, depending on the pleasure of the council, that would kind of communicate the city's support that might be helpful to the Blue Wing Adobe Trust as they go out and do the rest of their capital campaign and marketing. So
Okay, is there anything the city attorney would like to add, or nothing? Okay,
No, I don't think so.
thank you.
So if you want to, basically, if a council member wants to just say, so, so move based on what I outlined, and then a
Okay,
second.
so we would need we could take a roll call?
Yeah,
All
so
right.
moved.
Second.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Go in peace.
To Kathy. So as far as the details of like, we didn't really talk about where we think the money should come from. Is that just something that we can discuss?
Yeah,
when
so
this
what
all
we'll
comes
do, there's a couple things. One, you all may want to, we will come back with some options as part of mid-year, but honestly, I mean, as in December. But the other piece of this, Councilmember Hunley, is, what we may want to do is we can look at pulling it even, straight from unassigned reserves, and then as part of mid-year, we'll have a better sense where we're going, and we can always do some adjustments, so. And then we will be talking, as staff, we'll be working on the actual conservation easement parameters, and negotiating those, and I can be talking with you each one-on-one and getting any of your thoughts, and then we'll be bringing that back at the December meeting.
All right, thank you so much. We thought we'd be out of here by 7:30, but that's not close. Are there any reports for council members?
Just a report out from the legislative committee. It's the end of the year, so all of our representatives are busy working on their bill packages for next year, and all of them have asked if anyone has ideas as to things that they could do for us next year, to please let them know, because they're working on it right now. So if you have any ideas for great legislation, contact one of our state representatives. And another thing that our committee is putting together for the first time, because we spend a lot of our time discussing specific bills and deciding whether they help or hurt cities and then advocating for them. But we have been keeping track of what our recommendations have been and how all of our elected representatives have voted on these bills at all the various phases. And we're putting it all together in a handy informational guide so that all our other council members can see how our representatives are performing, and then if we can all, the committee can all agree on one, we're going to pick a legislator of the year. But I think we've already decided that everybody did really well this year. But it's just so you can just know what they're up to. But I think that we are pretty lucky with who we have right now.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Before I go to the city manager, I'd like to remind everyone that this evening was dedicated, number one, to Mr. Kevin O'Neill. And I think you have to provide the address if you have that. And then also the City of Paradise. And I believe, city manager, that you'll be able to do that appropriate, what's appropriate for us dedicating this evening to the City of Paradise.
Yeah, I'll work with the city clerk to put something together.
And also city manager comments and announcements.
I have none this evening, thank you.
That's it. Done. Oh.
Can I say thank you?
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you, very much.